Hello, I'm Wes Turnbull and welcome to Freemasons, The Inside Story. In this episode we meet Grand Chaplains David Thompson and David Bloom, and we also meet past Grand Director of Ceremonies Peter Julia. All that and more on Freemasons, The Inside Story.
Hi, I'm here today with Peter Julia, past Grand Director of Ceremonies in the Grand team. Hi Peter, thanks for coming today.
Thank you for the invitation, Erin.
Peter, you're past Grand Director of Ceremonies. Can you tell us a little bit about the role of Grand Director?
The Grand Director of Ceremonies is selected from previous Senior Grand Deacons. The selection committee is the Grand Master, the Deputy Grand Master and the Grand Secretary. They choose a number of past Senior Grand Deacons and make their choice as to who will be the next Deputy Grand Director of Ceremonies, moving on to be Grand Director of Ceremonies.
So once selected as Grand Director, what exactly does that entail?
The Grand Director of Ceremonies is responsible for all ceremonial work in the state of Victoria. Not lodge work, but installations of new masters, consecrations, dedications, etc.
And can you tell us a little bit about your journey into this position?
Well, I was a previous Senior Grand Deacon, and due to work commitments I was not able to accept a couple of previous offers to be the Grand Director, but having retired from work I was able to fortunately be asked to be the Grand Director, which I'm very happy to accept.
And I understand that while being asked to be the Grand Director in the craft, you were already holding a position as Grand Director in another degree called the Mark.
Yes.
That must have been a very busy time for you. Can you tell us a bit about it?
It was. I was the Grand Director in the Mark and the Assistant Grand Director in the craft for a short time, and that was required a lot of concentration to be doing a craft installation one night and a Mark installation perhaps the next night. But we got through all that.
Your term as Grand Director came to an end at the grand installation of Grand Master Hillel Benedict. Can you tell us some of the highlights over the past 16 months?
Some of the highlights, the beginning of the new team, which need training. We teach them to be Grand Officers and to participate in the grand installation, which takes many rehearsals, a lot of training, a lot of concentration, and the team were up to that, as all teams have been, but it does take concentration and specialised training for that night.
And what's involved in that training?
Well, it's not like a normal installation ceremony. We are on a different floor, we're on Dallas Brooks' floor, and that takes different movements, different steps. For the team it does, and the deacons have got extra movements they have to learn. And
they say that a Grand Director's entire year culminates to one day, the grand installation. Can you tell us a bit about that day and what was running through your mind?
Well, the grand installation of a new Grand Master is like a grand final. That is the only day, and everything must go right to get it right. Well, the ceremony, we had that under control, but there were all the delegations that we had to introduce and the individual members of those delegations. I think there were 42 names that I had to remember, and their states and their titles, and they were all introduced one after another after they entered the Grand Lodge to the Grand Master. That was going through my mind, trying to keep those in my mind.
And now that it's all over, what's next?
What's next? I said to Lynn that we would, she said, we would go on a cruise after our Mark year. but the craft came along and put a kibosh on that, but we are going away next year.
The role of Grand Director is a demanding role of your time and travel. You mentioned your support of your wife, Lynn. Can you tell us a little bit about your family's support within your role?
Lynn has been a great support. She has attended all the functions that we've been together with, and I'm sure she's enjoyed them all. Our family's grown up and got their own families and are away, so we can come and go as we please, except that it did interfere with some of the childminding duties, but the kids accepted that.
You've accomplished so much within Freemasonry, but can you tell us what it was that initially drew you into Freemasonry?
My father asked me to join his lodge. Many times he did ask, and eventually I did accept his offer. My uncle was also in that lodge down at Sandridge Marine in Port Melbourne, and I did join there. Unfortunately it doesn't exist anymore, but we've had many wonderful nights in Port Melbourne down there.
So a family connection.
Yes. I had the pleasure to present to him his 50, 60, 65, 70-year duels over time, most of them in Port Melbourne. And when he got his 70-year duel, we celebrated 100 years in Freemasonry. We were initiated on the same day and month, but 40 years apart.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Peter.
Pleasure. Thank you.
The term Mother Lodge is used to identify the particular lodge where the individual was first made a Freemason. Mother Lodge may also refer to a lodge which sponsors the creation of a new lodge, the Daughter Lodge, to be warranted under the jurisdiction of the same Grand Lodge. Lodge Mother Kilwinning is a Masonic lodge in Kilwinning, Scotland, under the auspices of the Grand Lodge of Scotland. It is number 0 on the roll and is reputed to be the oldest lodge not only in Scotland, but the world. It is thus styled the Mother Lodge of Scotland, attributing its origins to the 12th century, and is often called Mother Kilwinning.
We're lucky enough to have with us on Freemasons The Inside Story, Ken Willis, 12 months on. Ken, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me back, Ben.
12 months is a long time in Freemasonry, Ken. Tell me what's changed for you Masonically in 12 months.
A few things. So I've stepped into office in my lodge, in my craft lodge. I've become Junior Deacon, which is a little bit daunting because tonight a friend of mine is joining my lodge, as it happens. He's being initiated into Freemasonry, and the Junior Deacon has a lot to do for the candidate. So he'll be relying on me, and it's my first time doing it. But I suppose you have to jump in at the deep end to enjoy things and work them out, don't you?
You do, and tell me what it's like to be an officer of the lodge.
Look, it's more of a commitment, and I suppose the important thing is something I've noticed in Freemasonry is nobody expects you to contribute more than you're able to. I was asked would I like to, and I said yes, but if I didn't want to, of course, that would have been fine as well, because as we say, family and work always come first, and if you manage to fit Freemasonry in there somewhere afterwards, that's great.
Ken, tell us about your friend. He's joining Freemasonry tonight. How's his journey started with you?
His journey is a little bit similar to my own. I think he had, researched Freemasonry for years, formed a generally good opinion of what it meant, was a little bit intrigued as well. And he knew I was a Freemason, and at our lodge around November and April as well, we have memorial services for people who've fallen in combat. We have what's called a vacant chair ceremony, which is not an exclusively Masonic thing, but when our lodge does it, we open up the lodge to non-Masons and visitors. And so he came along at my suggestion one night, had a really good night, and then told me he'd like to join. So I said, great.
And what's your suggestions been to him as he's thought about Freemasonry and thought about putting the application through? How have you guided him through that process?
Well, one thing that was said to me was that, you know, there's very little actually secret in Freemasonry anymore. I'd say there are things that you might call private, but the aspects of the ceremony, etc. Look, if you know how to use Google, you can probably track these things down. That's not the point. The secrecy is not the point. So when you're going through the ceremony, the element of surprise has a very powerful lesson. At least it did for me, and that's what I was told before I joined. People said to me, other Freemasons said, you can easily find the ritual. We'd recommend that you don't, because it'll be more enjoyable and it'll be more symbolic if you don't. So I took that advice, and I've no basis for comparison, but I really enjoyed it. As a result, it was very, very dramatic, because the various degrees are basically like a series of plays, where if you're doing them, you're in the star role, but you don't know any of the lines, so you're being guided through the process. So I gave my friend exactly the same advice, and he has diligently followed it, or so he says, but that's up to him.
The next 12 months, Ken, what does that hold for you in Freemasonry? Being Junior Deacon, and then after that, where do we go from here?
Well, logically, in a craft lodge, you go to Senior Deacon. But look, this year is going to be a fun year. As I said, my friend is joining tonight. The deacons have a lot to do in a lodge, and when I become Senior Deacon as well, there's a bit more to do in some of the other degrees. Also, I've joined a number of other orders in Freemasonry as well. So learning a bit more about those and their significance is going to be interesting as well. I'm not sure if I'm going to join any more orders for the time being, because, well, as interesting as they are, they take up a lot of time. Time well spent, I think, but I suppose you have to work within your boundaries of family, friends, work, and all those other things as well.
We interviewed the Grand Master and First Grand Principal of the Marken Chapter. Are they one of the orders you joined to help complete your Masonic experience?
Yes, I did. So, look, in Masonry, if all you ever do is just the 3 degrees and never take office, we would all say, I'm sure you'd agree, that was time well spent. However, we say that the Mark degree is a little bit like a completion of the story of the 2nd degree, or the Fellowcraft degree. Yes. And the Holy Royal Arch degree is the completion of the 3rd degree, or Master Mason's degree. There's a lot to them, but I really like them. The Mark Master Mason's degree, the basic, without going into too much detail, the basic lesson of it is, that you should look beyond the blinkered attitudes of people, and kind of stick to your guns if you really know you're right. But it also teaches you humility at the same time.
The chapter, the extension of the 3rd degree, did that complete your Masonic experience for you, Ken?
In a way, one's Masonic experience is never completed. So yes and no. It answers some of the questions that are perhaps could be further explored if you wanted to in the Master Mason's degree, but then of course it opens up a whole load of other questions as well. I think of all the various orders, at least the ones I've seen, the Royal Arch degree is definitely the most colourful, and I mean literally colourful, in that there is lots of colours. It's very spectacular, but of course it's rich with symbolism as well. I would be lying if I said I fully understood the symbolism of all of it. But look, I think that's part of the beauty of all of Freemasonry, that there's so much symbolism to all of the degrees that you might see the same degree being performed year in, year out for there are members who have been members for 60 odd years, but it never gets old, and each time you learn something new about it.
Ken, finally, what are some of the highlights for your journey in the last 12 months?
I think one of the most enjoyable experiences I had, even though it wasn't really anything to do with me, of course, but when our most recent Grand Master, Lel Benedict, was installed, there was a Shabbat Kiddush, Shabbat service and Kiddush following his installation. And look, I think religious pluralism is one of the most important values and building blocks of Freemasonry. And what I really liked, even though I would have expected nothing less, what I really liked is how so many Freemasons turned up to the synagogue up in Toorak Road. Freemasons of all walks of life. I'm sure there were plenty of Christians, Muslims, Buddhists, Hindus. You name it, they were there. And I thought everyone coming out to celebrate, you know, our brother and new Grand Masters, religion basically, and acknowledge that. I thought that was a very nice thing, and it really, for me, that really demonstrated one of the core principles of Freemasonry.
Ken, thanks for joining us again on Freemasons Inside Story, and I'm sure our viewers and everyone associated with it wishes you the best for the next 12 months.
See you next year.
Freemasonry is a worldwide fraternal organisation that offers men of all ages and backgrounds opportunities for personal development and community service. Yet many think it's a religion, which it's not. To dispel this misconception, we have with us today two senior Freemasons, David Bloom and David Thompson. Welcome to you both.
Good evening.
Thank you.
Now, both of you have a ceremonial role in Freemasonry in Victoria, known as Grand Chaplains. Can you tell us a little bit about that role and what it means in a ceremonial sense and in all other senses? Perhaps we can start with you, David Bloom.
The role of Grand Chaplain is, as you've rightly said, ceremonial in part, and in part it's acting as a senior Grand Officer to assist in installations and to support other activities of Grand Lodge, particularly at quarterly communications and other important events.
David Thompson, we mentioned the concept of installations and quarterly communications. What are they, and what's the role the Grand Chaplain plays within those ceremonial events?
At the quarterlies, the Grand Chaplain has the responsibility for saying prayers at various times during the ceremony, and at installations he plays a support role for the installing master.
Does the role of Grand Chaplain extend beyond ceremonial duties?
There's not been a great emphasis on that in the past, but increasingly we're realising that there is a role, particularly for some form of pastoral care for Freemasons, and particularly for our fellow members of the senior and ceremonial teams.
And what sort of form would that pastoral care take?
Well, I think there's an opportunity, for instance, for some education. We can assist brethren to understand just how their beliefs assist them to carry out their Masonic duties and to underline their moral and ethical basis on which they operate.
So when a man comes to Freemasonry, he needs to profess a faith in a supreme being. That's not professing a particular religion. So why is it couched in those terms, David Thompson?
It's to recognise that there is what we call a faith belief, which is the belief in a supreme being, and that enables us to reach out across religious barriers, because it's and beyond that, it's simply because a supreme being can be many things to many people, but nevertheless that is the one thing that every Freemason must profess before he is admitted.
So anyone from any religion can be a Freemason?
Yes, certainly, and in fact a belief in a supreme being offers an opportunity to provide that moral basis, that authority, if you like, on which all Freemasons particularly profess to operate their daily lives. So it's very important that we have that underlying belief, but it doesn't formalise how they're going to practice and how they're going to observe that belief.
How do you find that Freemasonry is dovetailed into your faith and your belief system?
Well, it's very compatible with my faith, which is the Jewish faith. It really underscores it. It's very basic to Judaism to be able to understand a belief and the moral and ethical basis on which one operates.
And David, do you find that similarly with your faith and your background?
As a Christian, I find that, in fact, both Freemasonry and my faith integrate very well. They complement one another and they invite exploration of what faith really means.
So what attracted you initially to Freemasonry?
First of all, friendship, because as a newcomer to Victoria, I needed and wanted that opportunity to interact. But secondly, the ceremonial I find a most attractive aspect of Freemasonry, and this is one of the reasons why I was keen to participate and learn more about it.
And David Bloom, historically Grand Chaplains have been ordained brethren. That's not the case with you. Do you find that inconsistent with your role and what you can bring to the Grand Chaplaincy?
No, not at all. I'm considered a lay leader, and the skills and opportunities that I can bring and the thoughts that I can bring to Freemasonry are not really based on the fact that I'm ordained or not. And in fact, most lodge chaplains are not ordained themselves. So I don't see any conflict. It's really the skills and the passion and the understanding that you bring to the role.
So when we talk to prospective members of Freemasonry, what do we say in terms of Freemasonry being consistent or not inconsistent with their religious and cultural beliefs?
I think it's important to bring out that it's not only consistent, but as David has previously said, it is actually helpful in identifying their faith and how it underscores their religion.
Well, thank you very much to both of you for being with us to talk about your Freemasonry and how it relates to your faith and your beliefs.
Thanks, Peter. It was a pleasure.
Thanks for joining us. To find out more about Freemasonry, visit the Freemasons Victoria website at www.freemasonsvic.net.au or phone us on 1800 Freemason. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, Flickr, LinkedIn and Google+. Next week on Freemasons The Inside Story, we meet Freemasons Victoria Grand Secretary and CEO Peter Henshall.